This video will look at the very end of Matthew chapter 27. Jesus is on the cross, and then we will go to Psalm 22. We are going to commence in Matthew chapter 27 with verse 34. They gave him vinegar to drink, mingled with gall, and when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. This is not vinegar as we know it. It was simply a cheap wine, and the gall was a drug from a poppy, an opiate, and it was used as a painkiller for those who were being crucified, and Jesus refused it. And then, of course, later, after the resurrection, persons spread the word that he had not died at all, that he had simply been drugged and then put in a tomb, and then when he came to, he was taken out of the tomb. But notice here that he refused that drug. 35, and they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. These would have been the Roman soldiers who were beneath the cross there. And what happened, they divided up the clothes and the shoes, and they gambled for the vesture. And that vesture was a garment without a seam, and it was a priestly robe, and it was an expensive garment, and that is why they cast lots for it. 36. And sitting down, they watched him there. And you are going to see that was prophesied. 37, and set up over his head his accusation written, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." 38, and there were thieves there too. There were two thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and one on the left. 39, and they that passed by reviled him, wagging their heads. 40, and saying, Thou that destroyed the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. And John 19 tells us that they only claimed that he said he claimed to be the King of the Jews, not that he was. They wanted that corrected because the Romans put up the King of the Jews, and they said no. He simply said that is what he was. 41, likewise also the chief priests mocking him, and the scribes and elders said, 42, he saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. And of course here, when he is called the King of Israel, that would be not just Jews, because that would have been the tribe of Judah and some Benjamites and some Levites, but the 10 tribes to the north would have been the entirety of the 12 tribes. 43. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him, for he said, I am the Son of God. 44. The thieves also, which were crucified with him, cast the same in his teeth. They were mocking and poking fun as well. 45. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over the land unto the 9th hour, and the 6th hour would have been noon, and the 9th hour would have been 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And remember that this crucifixion took place during Passover. It took place on the day of preparation. Passover would have been the next day. It would have been the high holy Sabbath. There would have been 2 Sabbaths that week, this one, and then the regular Saturday Sabbath. And the 3 o'clock in the afternoon was the time when the lamb was sacrificed. The sacrificial lamb, Passover lambs, were slain at 3. And at that same time, the chief priest, in this case, old Caiaphas, would have been ready to walk through the veil into the Holy of Holies from the outer part of the temple, and this was the only person who could go into the Holy of Holies. Some of them, 45, and about this 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Now you will hear some sermons that will tell you that God forsook Jesus when he was there on the cross. And these words that Jesus spoke are in the Aramaic language, and it means, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And what has happened here? Did Jesus ever call God God? No, he never did. He always called God Father. And turn now, if you would, to Psalm 22, and you are going to see a prophecy of everything that Matthew has written, prophesied 1,000 years ahead of the event. And the opening verse reads, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from helping me and from the words of my roaring? Now, God didn't forsake Jesus. And who wrote this? David. Jesus is merely going to say this entire psalm aloud because it predicted 1,000 years before all of the things that Matthew has just described for us. Number 2, oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but thou hearest not, and in the night season, and am not silent. 3, but thou art holy, O thou that inhabitest the praises of Israel. And of course, the praises of Israel, the persons who praise and worship will always be looking after. Our fathers trusted in thee, they trusted, and thou didst deliver them. They were delivered out of bondage, 5, they cried unto thee, and were delivered, and trusted in thee, and were not confounded. They were not confused. 6, but I am a worm, and no man, a reproach of men, and despised of the people. And he was. He came into Jerusalem at the beginning of this Passover season and was widely acclaimed. And by a few days later, that same throng were screaming for his crucifixion. Now, I want to talk about this worm. It's a little creature, and it was used to make dye, red dye. Red cloth in those times would have been quite valuable because this is how they got it. These little tiny insect stage of an insect, and when it died, it oozed red liquid, and this is what's going to happen to Jesus. He is giving his blood in the place of the Passover lamb. He is like this worm that oozes red. 7, all they that see me laugh me to scorn. They shoot out the lip, they shake their heads, saying, he trusted on the Lord that he would deliver him. Let him deliver him, seeing he delighted in him. And that's what Matthew said they were doing. They were mocking, they were jeering, they were laughing, and they were saying, well, if he can be delivered and the Lord would deliver him, well, let him come down off that cross. 8, he trusted on the Lord that he would deliver him. Let him deliver him, seeing he delighted in him. 9, but thou art he that took me out of the womb. Thou didst make me hope when I was upon my mother's breast. 10, I was cast upon thee from the womb, and thou art my God from my mother's belly. And this is David speaking, but he is prophesying here the death and the crucifixion of the Messiah. 11, be not far from me, for trouble is near, for there is none to help. Where were the disciples? If we look in the earlier part of Matthew and in the other gospel writers, we discover that they ran. Every one of them took off. 12, many bulls have compassed me, strong bulls of Bashan have beset me round, and those are enemies, and they are, and Bashan was a region famous for very large cattle. 13, they gaped upon me with their mouths as a ravening and a roaring lion. And if you look at the Gospel of Mark in verses 13 and 14, that will also substantiate Matthew's reading that they had their mouths open, gaping and staring. And I want to point out that when we use the cross in our churches, we have a tall vertical, and the cross beam is not midway, but is up at the top. Now, this region of the world did not have tall trees, and the cross member on the vertical was not at the top, but was more toward the middle. These persons who were watching the crucifixion and who were laughing and scorning were almost at eye level with Jesus. He was not way up high on a cross, and the verticals remained in place, and the person who carried his cross. Often we'll see movies and such that show Jesus dragging the entire cross, the vertical and the crossbeam. It was the crossbeam that the person carried to Golgotha, and then that crossbeam was put upon the vertical. Let us look at verse 14, still in Psalm 22. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of my joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. He was on that cross, and the weight of his body was pulling his arms, would have been out of joint at the shoulder. 15, my strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaveth to my jaws. And thou hast brought me into the dust of death. He's very thirsty here, and he is at one point said, I thirst, and they could try to give him a water of soap, wine-soaked sponge, and he did refuse it, especially the ones with the gall. For dogs have compassed me, the assembly of the wicked have enclosed me, they pierced my hands and my feet, and we know that his hands and his feet were nailed, and the dogs there are the enemies, and there were no friends there. From afar off were all the Marys and Salome and John, the disciple. 17, I may tell all my bones, they look and stare at me. He was a spectacle. He was beaten nearly to a pulp and struggling to breathe and out of joint. 18, they part my garments among them and cast lots for my vesture. And here he's speaking this out loud, hanging there on the cross. And those Roman soldiers, who of course knew nothing of the Old Testament and probably couldn't understand his Aramaic language, and he was telling them that it had been predicted that they would part his garments and gamble for that seamless robe. And you want to wonder, the scribes and the elders, they knew Psalm 22. They had studied it in Hebrew school. Those who were educated to serve in the temple would certainly have known. 19, but he, not thou, far from me, O Lord, O my strength, make thee to help me. 20, deliver my soul from the sword, my darling from the power of the dogs. And that darling should be translated soul. And if you have a more modern translation, it may very well use the word soul. I use King James for the reason that I can take the words back using Dr. Strong's Concordance and other reference books. You can get to the original word and not trust that your translator was accurate. 20, deliver my soul from the sword, my darling. And he is saying, deliver my soul from the sword. The sword can't kill the soul, of course. and our soul is our being and what goes to be with God. 21. Save me from the lion's mouth, for thou hast heard me from the horns of the unicorn. And the unicorn ought to be translated as a wild ox and not a unicorn, because a unicorn is not a real animal at all. It's a mythological animal. 23. Ye that fear the Lord, praise him, and all ye that the seed of Jacob glorify him, and fear him, all ye the seed of Israel. For 24. He hath not despised nor abhorred He hath not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted, neither hath he hid his face from him, but when he cried unto him, he heard. God didn't forsake Jesus. Of course, he heard, and of course, Jesus is God, and he is part of the Godhead. He was present at the creation. We will create man in our image. We, all of the three of the Godhead. And how can you forsake yourself? So if you've heard a sermon on or a teacher telling you that God forsook Jesus, it just isn't true. Jesus came to the earth. He started out on this 3-year ministry. He knew full well how it would end. He knew the scripture. He knew what was said in Psalm 22, and he's there hanging on that cross saying that psalm. 26. My praise shall be of thee in the congregation. I will pay my vows before them that fear him, that revere him. He is paying his vows. He is completing his earthly mission. 27. All the ends of the world shall remember and turn unto the Lord, and all the kindreds of the nations shall worship before him. And that is at the end of the age, at the millennium, and it will happen that every knee will bow at the appearance of the real Jesus on Mount Zion. Now, not every knee will necessarily stay bowed, but every knee will bow. 27. All the ends of the world shall remember and turn unto the Lord, and all the kindreds of the nations shall worship before thee. We read that, and that's that verse about every knee. 28. For the kingdom is the Lord's, and he is the governor among the nations. And they had, when he came into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, they expected that he would drive out the Romans, that he would be the King of Kings and the governor of the nations. And that was not his mission in his turn here on the earth in a human body. His turn here was to do a 3-year ministry, to heal and to drive out demons and to perform miracles, and then this awful end on that Roman cross, that we might not have to sacrifice a lamb, that he paid the all-time ultimate price, giving his blood and his body, that our soul might not meet the sword. In other words, we were given the opportunity for eternal life with God the Father. He overcame death, and death, of course, is Satan. A seed shall serve him, and it shall be accounted to the Lord for a generation. And that generation there is the generation of the fig tree, and it is spoken of in Mark chapter 13. And that seed, that is that small remnant, there will all, even if the whole world goes awry, there will always be a small remnant that will remain true. 31 to conclude Psalm 22. They shall come and shall declare his righteousness unto a people that shall be born. He hath done this. Now, if we translate the he hath done this into Greek, it would have said, it is finished. And his work was finished, and he gave up the ghost. Turn back now with me to Matthew 27, and we will pick it up where we left out. Some of them had cried, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That was, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And we have gone through Psalm 22 to see that he actually quoted the entire of the chapter. And 47, some of them that stood there when they heard that said, This man calleth for Elias. That would have been Elijah. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave him to drink. And that would have been real wine. It would not have had that mingling of gall with that poppy-based opiate, and that is also prophesied in Psalm 69, verse 21, if you would care to look that up. "49, the rest said, Let be, let us see whether Elias will come to save him. Let's just wait, maybe Elijah will come down. God hadn't come, but maybe Elijah will. These are real doubters. 50. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent." Now, 3 o'clock. The 9th hour, old Caiaphas would have been preparing to walk in there into that Holy of Holies and put the blood on the horns of that little altar in there that stood by the Ark of the Covenant, before the Ark of the Covenant, and then he would have gone in, and that curtain ripped from the top down. Now, the sins of the people, the gratefulness for the Passover, the blood of the Paschal Lamb was sprinkled about by the high priest, and a high priest had to intercede for the people. And the point is, the veil was opened up. We no longer have to have a high priest. We can go directly to God through Jesus because he split that veil. 52, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose And if you would look at Paul's work in Hebrews chapter 9, especially verses 12 through 14, Paul explains why Jesus died on the cross, and that would be a good side study. 53, and out came out of the graves after his resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared unto many, and that would have been as witnesses. And then the body had to be taken down because we're on the eve of the High Holy Day, and they had to get that body buried quickly. And Joseph of Arimathea, who happened to be Jesus' great uncle, an uncle of Mary, put him in a grave that he himself owned. And of course, it was prophesied that I'm going to read 57, verse 57 of Matthew. When the even was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. He went to Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be delivered. He became the kinsman redeemer for Jesus, and he could do so because he was a blood relative. This is predicted in Isaiah 53:9 that he would lie in a rich man's tomb. 59, and when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth. 60, and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre and departed. Now the next day would have been Passover. Nothing could be done. And the next day after that was another preparation day for the Passover on Saturday. And then on Sunday, these ladies who went out to anoint the body with herbs and spices, they would have not been able to touch a dead body on a preparation day. They would have been made unclean, and of course they could not have done that work on either the day of Passover or on the regular Sabbath day. I will tell you that the way that we celebrate the Resurrection Sunday was decided by the Nicene Council several hundred years after the death of Jesus on the cross. They departed from the Bible, which teaches that he died on the eve of Passover. John is the one disciple who gets it absolutely correct as to the days. And the only way that you can have him in that tomb 3 days is that he was crucified on Wednesday, the eve of Passover. The next day is Passover. The next day, Friday, is a day of preparation. Saturday is a holy day, the regular Sabbath. And the women went to the tomb on Sunday morning and found him gone. That gives you 3 days. And I will tell you this, the Nicene Council set and named Easter. Easter was named for a pagan goddess named Ishtar, and Ishtar was worshipped on a day following the Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox, or the first day of spring. And that is why Easter is all over the calendar, because it follows the moon and not the sun. Passover was set by the sun. Passover occurs 15 days exactly from the spring equinox. This year, the spring equinox was on March 20th, and April 5th would have been, as the Bible teaches, the actual day of Passover. This video has been in volunteer outreach of the Essex Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri.